Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Grammy-nominated blues musician Shemekia Copeland, Grammy Award-winning songwriter and producer Jimmy Jam, Grammy Award-winning musician Wyclef Jean, and founding executive director of the Grammy Museum, Bob Santelli.
Everyone. Let me introduce my panel. I'm Bob Santelli from the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles. This is Shemekia Copeland, great blueswoman. Jimmy Jam, my colleague from Los Angeles, and the great Wyclef Jean from New Jersey. Just as a little bit of a prelude before we start talking, anyone who knows anything about American popular music knows two things. One is that it has been one of the great cultural exports of our nation, and also a great indicator of who we are as Americans. We have one of the greatest, if not the greatest, popular music tradition in all the world. And the second thing is that race and popular music have always intersected each other right from the beginnings of time. So my first question to my panel, and I'll ask each of you, beginning with Jimmy Jam, as African-American artists, people of color who are in the music industry, do you think that artists have a responsibility to somehow deal in some way, shape, or form with the issue of race in their art?
Wow, great question. So I think that musicians have a responsibility in general, because what they're dealing with is, to me, what I call the divine art, which is music. It's that ability to touch people, to bring people together in ways that no other art form can do it. So just as a general, I would say yes, but I think that I'm not someone that would ever tell anybody what they should do. But I do think you should respect the platform and appreciate the platform that you've been given as a musician. And so for us, I remember we did a record, it's been, 30 years ago, I think now, maybe a little more than that. We had a group called Sounds of Blackness. And it was a very important project for us to do because it really embraced all of the African-American art forms. And that was something that we chose to do. It wasn't, I don't think we necessarily felt like it was something we had to do, but it was certainly something we wanted to share with people and to take that advantage to bring people's ears and to make people feel better. And for us, it's probably our favorite record that we've ever done because of the way that it affected people. It was a hit and we won a Grammy for it, but more importantly, the way it affected people was very enlightening for us.
Yeah. Shemekia?
Oh, absolutely. We have a responsibility. I started making records when I was really young, and when you're young, you don't really have that much to say. But as I grew in the business, I started originally with songs about social injustice, and then date rape, and even domestic violence. And here just recently, with everything that's going on here in our country, definitely songs about just hate, injustice, and racism. And so we absolutely have a responsibility. And so.
Wyclef?
Well, I mean, I want to just, first of all, say the only reason I'm wearing this hat, because I knew he was going to be here. Don't get it twisted. This
you didn't
original.
Tell me, man. I got
you feel me? Like, that's total respect, first of all. You feel me? So, you know, I come from Haiti. I was born in Haiti. I didn't get to America to the age of 9 years old. So I would say for me, I'm a student of like Harry Belafonte, you know? Automatically, for me, where I come from, the idea being in a village, having nothing to eat at times. So you're on a donkey, you know? And the dream is if you can get to America, you're going to make it. And then when they tell you if you could get to America, they're not telling us that, you know, it's country music, it's R&B music, we don't have no clue. So now, by the time I get to the projects, I'm 11 years old. By the time I'm 12 years old, I can't speak English, so I can't tell the difference between Pink Floyd, Police, Synchronicity, Run DMC, and Bob Marley. It all just sounded like good music to me. So I think the responsibility is that we have to instill the truth about music to the kids at a very young age. And I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing an explosion where you can't defy music through a genre. If you look at the kid Nas X right now, he's doing a little kid doing country trap. Now some people are like, what is trap, Wyclef? So it's just, to me, it's more that music has to be used to break barriers. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Back in the first part of the 20th century, we always had pop charts, which indicated how well a song was doing on the charts and how it sold. But back then, prior to World War II in particular, there were two charts. There were the race charts, which dealt with African-American music, and there were the pop charts, which were primarily white in their origins. Along comes a man by the name of Berry Gordy, and Berry Gordy finds a way through Motown to get African-American pop music onto the white charts. And he does that in the 1960s in a very, very big way. Jimmy, when you look back and you look at the role that Berry Gordy and Smokey Robinson and others played in Motown to bring this out and to finally integrate those charts, is that really the beginning of when African-American music can really not only deal with a pop side, but also deal with issues that are very, very significant to African-Americans?
Well, yeah, I mean, Motown for me was probably the biggest influence that even it had on me just as a musician or even wanting to even be in the music industry in any way. I remember when I was really young seeing a record that was, I think it was the Supremes sing Holland Dozier Holland. Yeah. And I remember asking my dad, who was also a musician, I said, what does that mean, Holland Dozier Holland? And he said, those are the songwriters. And that was the first time I even realized, oh, songwriters, okay. That there was people that actually wrote the songs and people that actually played the songs, people that produced the songs, just the different roles that music played. And then culturally for me, growing up, when you see artists today, you know, I think of Beyonce is always my first example of someone who has really transcended every area in media, in films and television and just everything. Back in those days, if you were a musician, you were just a musician. It wasn't that you were doing other things. You didn't have the opportunity to do those other things. The fact that Berry had the vision to do films, to do television specials, was very, it was exciting. It was exciting to see all of a sudden on TV, see black faces, yeah. To see in movies black faces, to hear black music. And the other thing was the music that Motown did was different to me because of the sophistication of it. There were strings and there was horns and there was arrangements and there was all these things that you heard that if, you know, music is the soundtrack of your life, then what he did is made all our lives so much broader and so much better.
At the same time, Motown didn't really deal in great detail, let's say musical detail, with the civil rights movement or any of the issues that were confronting African Americans in the 1960s.
But they did later on, because when, I remember Edwin Starr, War, right. I remember when the Temptations switched from doing the love songs and all of a sudden we're talking about, you know, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, Psychedelic Shack, and those types of songs. And all of a sudden, Ball of Confusion, so on and so forth, with Norman Whitfield, who was a great writer and producer of those songs. So I think they were very aware of the times and musically put that forth, which was very important.
Staple singers did it in a big way. Yeah. They were, for me, even now, Mavis Staples is a huge part of one of the reasons why I want to talk about issues in my songs, because the Staple singers were, they were brilliant at doing that. And bringing people together.
And on the front lines of civil rights.
Absolutely. They were right there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we actually had Mavis Staples was on this stage a few years ago when we talked about civil rights here at the LBJ Presidential Library. She was something, I'll tell you. Hip hop, on the other hand, with groups like NWA and Public Enemy, Chuck D, and Fugees and others embraced it. You seem to be that music form seemed to tackle head-on issues confronting particularly young African Americans, inner cities, and attacking it, even though for some people who were listening to the music, it was, whoa, it was pretty hardcore, spoke the truth. Is that something that still inspires you today, Wyclef?
Well, I mean, you have young kids like Young Thug, who's 24. His song is called Wyclef Jean.
That's right.
So it's more. But think about this. So I'm 19 years old, and I call my group Fugees. Fugees, which is short for refugees. The first Fuji album is an album called Blunted on Reality. The first song on Blunted on Reality is a poem to the KKK. Right? So can you imagine we get our record deal and they say, what y'all gonna do? Well, we're gonna write a poem to the Ku Klux Klan. So I only say that because at the end of the day, hip-hop music and country music, original country, like Johnny Cash that be talking that talk, you know, like it or dislike it, what happens is the reason why hip-hop is the biggest form of music around the world is because it gives kids a chance to break barriers. And, you know, if you're doing Russian hip-hop, you in Palestine, you in Israel, you in Brooklyn, on the internet, we all somehow connect. And I think that the power of that, we was influenced by NWA, Public Enemy, KRS-One, all the way up to today, like a Kendrick Lamar. So I think that that's what hip hop does.
Yeah. In blues, you have a brand new, really great record out, America's Child. And there are some songs on that record that deal with issues of race head on, and they come almost semi-autobiographical, I would imagine. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I did a song called Would You Take My Blood? My father, who was a great blues musician named Johnny Copeland, was in the hospital waiting for a heart transplant. And while he was in the hospital, there was another man in there with him that was adamant about the fact that he did not want blood from anybody that was like him. And this was over 20 years ago. And so this song was a long time in the making, but we were finally able to get it into song and put it out there for people. And it's just been amazing, the reaction that we're getting from it. I'm really
what was
proud
it about
of it.
Precisely? I mean, how could you explain the instance on this
Just,
sentence? Yeah.
you know, if you were waiting and needing blood, would you take mine?
Right.
You know, and would you take my blood? That's
so is this a
basically it.
white man sitting there and being offered black blood?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And it took you this long to write it?
Exactly. Well, it took this long to have the courage to just put it out there in a big way and be comfortable doing it. Like I said, I mean, I've been making records for a long time. I started when I was like 17 years old. So, you know, at 17, you sing about your boyfriends and and that's about it. But then for me, things evolved and changed, and so now I'm just putting things out there in a big way and saying, you know, would you take my blood? And I ain't got time for hate, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. The whole history of American popular music is based on really exploitation of African American songwriters, producers, artists, etc. Back in the day, in the early blues days, even before your dad, people would sign contracts, and instead of getting royalties, they would just be paid for the session, and that was it, and never saw a dime after that. That happened, and it was a shame. Does it still happen today? I mean, if you're a young African American and you're looking for a contract, and you have talent and you have music, what are the challenges that you face in terms of getting a fair deal, a deal that would be the same kind of deal a white person would get?
You always have people that are going to take it or try to take advantage, but I think young people today are way more educated, you know, than say my father, who was one of those artists that got fully taken advantage of. He wrote great songs that he never got credit for. But I think young people today, you know, they got the internet, man. They're good. They're good. And social media, you know, they got all that.
What I think is, and I agree with you, and I think what's really good, social media I think is great for that reason, because it connects you directly to folks, which I think is a great thing. But it also means, the other side of that, it also means there's a lot more misinformation out there too. So I think it's harder to decipher what is actually good information. But yeah, people still get it taken advantage of. I mean, that's just kind of life, unfortunately, is what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Wyclef, you do a lot of work with young people on college campuses in the inner cities. Do you feel that their knowledge of what's going on and how to avoid getting taken advantage of is strong enough?
Well, what happens is through hip hop, we give information. So the new generation has the information. That's why they will not sign to no label right away. So when you have like kids like Chance the Rapper, I mean, my daughter's 14 years old. You can't fool her. She come to me, she said, Dad, you got to sue the Migos. They just sample Narcos. I'm like, for real? But they're my peoples. I can't sue the Migos, baby. I'll just have a talk with them. But this is what I did, right? I still believe that, you know, the human is stronger than the AI, right? But at the end of the day, the combination of both is what works. So on the last Carnival tour, what we did was I said, I'm gonna do a project called Wyclef Goes Back to School. So while I was touring the Carnival throughout America, we went to the schools, and it wasn't no reality show. I popped up in the music programs, and if I felt someone was the next Adele, I was like, okay, you're gonna be on the next Wyclef project. If I felt someone was the next J. Cole, so ain't no robot telling you. I'm telling you this, right? Ain't no trickery on Spotify saying, you just listen to this, I know you wanna listen to this. And I think like in 2 weeks, 80% of all college students, and it streamed over 1 million copies in 2 weeks. So I believe in the power still of physically showing up, because sometimes you get so much information. And I mean, think about it. We created a lot of this music and continue to create it. So the AI ain't gonna be smarter than us. What the AI is able to do is the information you put inside of it, it's able to give back. The reason why I did that, I felt like major labels are getting mad lazy, bro. They just got somebody sitting there and like, yo, 100 million on YouTube, let's give this kid a call. And I think that we still need the origin of the physical person with the talent that understands showing up and still blessing the game. It's important.
Yeah.
Well, talent knows talent.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Talent knows talent.
Yeah.
So.
Yo, you see how much of an OG he said? Like he just said it in 2 words, baby. Talent. I'm gonna use that in a rhyme, bro. I got you. I'm gonna give you 5%. I got you.
Jimmy, a question for you, and kind of for me as well, because we're both members, well, everyone's a member of the Recording Academy, but we're more intimately connected to what goes on there. Years ago, the Recording Academy, the Grammys, for those of you who don't know what the Recording Academy is, took a big hit because it took us a long time to recognize hip hop as a viable music form. And I remember Will Smith, when he first won his first Grammy, he had been hoping that for previous records, he would be invited to the Grammys. And he had a speech written for each one, should he actually be nominated, hip hop actually be recognized. And when he finally won, I don't know if you remember that famous scene back then, where he said, okay, so I'm here, so I'm gonna read my first speech, then I'm gonna read my second speech, and then I'll read this speech here because it's way too long overdue. What caused that? Was that a racial thing, do you think? And again, it's just your opinion. We're both from the same cloth here.
Well, I think, first of all, what I learned about the Grammys in my kind of history there is that it's a membership organization. Yeah. So the organization is only as strong as its members, okay? So if you have a situation where, let's say hip hop music, I remember when I first came on board, because I didn't know, first of all, when I joined the Grammys, I didn't know that you could join. And they said, well, if you join, you can vote for yourself. And I said, okay, cool. So this was long ago. This was probably like 85, 86. So I joined, and we won Producer of the Year because I voted for it. You know, I said, okay, well, this is I like this. Yeah, I like this.
Voting works.
So that was our first Grammy we ever won. But when I actually got involved and realized that the organization isn't just about an award show one night of the year, it's the other 364 days. And when I became a member of the board, the thing that I remember looking at, and one of the things that the Grammys does that I think is very cool, is they encourage you to bring the next person along. So when you join the board of governors, they want you to mentor somebody. And I remember looking around the room and thinking, there's no hip hop sitting at this table. Yeah. There's a lot of very educated music people sitting here, great musicians, great producers, artists, everything. There's no hip hop sitting at the table. And there was not a lot of females sitting at the table either. So I brought MC Lyte into it. MC Lyte became not only the chapter president of the LA chapter, but became a trustee on the national board and the whole thing. And then she in turn brought whoever she brought. And so now it's different. When I look in the boardroom now, I see hip hop sitting at the table, along with country and rock and all the other genres and blues that as should be. So I think the challenge is still obviously always in motion, right? It doesn't end. But I think that the Grammys has made great strides. I think we see it in the diversity of the nominations every year, or not every year, but in most years now, that it's better. But it's only as good as the members. So I think that's really it's about empowering the members and getting them involved in it, and that's the most important thing.
You're absolutely right. I sit on the board as a governor in Chicago.
There you go.
And I'm the only blues artist there.
Right.
In the city of the blues.
Chicago,
right. So, but here's a cool thing, and so I hope that what happens is you're getting the opportunity to mentor that next person that's come along, to talk to the blues community and say, we want you to get involved.
Yes.
Because like I say, that's what makes the organization great. The fact that you're a part of it makes the organization great.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of the blues, I mean, you represent the music form up here that has the longest history and is oftentimes, especially in its early years, most identified with black suffering, black racism, Jim Crowism, et cetera, and blues being a reaction to that, an ability to express yourself musically through that. Do you carry that kind of sense of history in your music as well?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I started listening to blues music as a young girl, and there were all these songs about men, all these like domestic violence, old blues songs, and then, you know, further educating myself, I realized that they weren't talking about women. They were talking about slave owners, and they were singing about things that they could sing about and get away with versus, you know, things they couldn't.
Right,
and so one of those things were, you know, I'm gonna kill my woman, I'm gonna beat her, I'm gonna do this. They were really talking about slave owners. So I was able to learn that, and I definitely carried in. But I think now, you know, people, I see now people, they do songs about, you know, standing at the crossroads and songs about, you know, picking cotton and things like that. I've not had that experience, you know. My family, people in my family have had that experience. So what I do is I sing about my experience, and the one way that I try to keep blues music current is singing about current issues. And that's the one thing that I'm doing, I think, different than other blues artists. I'm keeping it current and doing things about what I know about and issues that are bothering me at the time. So.
Except for the 1920s when you had Bessie Smith and Mamie Smith and all the great blues women, the divas, blues has been primarily a male-driven music form.
Well, guitar players plugged in, and that was it for the women after that. Because it was all about entertaining, and women were great entertainers at the time. But then when they plugged in, that was it for us. The entertaining kind of went out the window, and people actually pay money to just stand there and watch people play guitar, which is also great, but the entertainment part of it sort of went out the window. So, and that's what happened to the women.
Does that pose any challenges for you today, being a blues woman, or is it pretty much equal?
Oh, God, no. I'm a woman that sings blues. There's nothing equal about it. Jeez. A black woman that sings blues in a male-dominated business. No equality at all. No, I have my challenges, but I work with, but I work with amazing, wonderful people that we keep it together. But yeah, there's challenges, absolutely, yeah. That's all I'm going to say about that.
That's it. That's it. Wyclef, I know Bob Marley has meant a lot to you, both spiritually as well as musically, and he's one of the greatest world musicians of all time. Talk about a little bit about Marley's legacy and how his legacy has kind of infiltrated into your music style.
Well, I mean, I could speak in behalf of Bob Marley because of his son. This is probably one of the greatest Grammy stories I'm gonna tell y'all ever. Why I like the Grammys, even though they like, we should have won Best Album of the Year, you know what I'm saying? It's cool, it's cool. But let me tell you, this real talk. So we about to go on at the Grammys, and we backstage, me and Steve Marley, Bob Marley's son. And we about to go on, and we know at the time the platform is gonna give viewership of over 20 million people. And I look and I say, yo, where's my Haitian flag? And I'm like, yo, I can't go on until I get my Haitian flag. This is it. And Steve goes, where's my Jamaican flag? I can't go on without my flag. This is Bob Marley's son. Yeah. And we go out there with a Haitian flag and a Jamaican flag. And we start to perform No Woman, No Cry. And it's the first time on the Grammy stage that they ever saw two flags from the island. And I can't say more than that when it comes to Bob Marley, because that's how deep rooted he is inside of us. Because even in a moment of glory, we both like, yo, because it's really like we not doing it for us, because we know like there's people back home that are sitting in the island, and if they see us with the flags, then they know that they could have a shot. That's what Bob Marley meant to us. Yeah.
I wanted to mention something about education. We talked about Grammys, and we talked about Wyclef, you going on college campuses and universities. Yet, when you go into primary and secondary education, in many, many school districts, particularly in poor and inner city school districts, arts education is gone. I mean, there's no attention paid to music, there's no attention paid to art, and of course, we know the dangers of that. How do we overcome that? How do we make sure that particularly young African-American kids, Latino kids, kids from inner cities who don't necessarily have the same opportunities as, say, white kids, middle class and beyond in suburbia, how do we make sure that they get the proper musical education so that this great American music tradition can continue? Shemekia would just go down the road here.
Well, for me, for one, I do blues in schools. It's all about education. So I feel like as artists, we just do everything we can, donate our time, and just do whatever we can to get the music to them. Donate instruments. I've done that also, and just keep it going for them. Especially now since they're taking music out of schools like crazy, and of course Grammy music. Yeah. The Grammy
the board, education stuff that we do.
It's amazing work, so you just have to continue
For those who don't know, explain very quickly what Blues in the Schools, what that program is.
Well, it's just blues artists, we go into schools, elementary schools, high schools, and we just talk about blues music and educate the kids about the music. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Jimmy?
That's awesome.
Music education.
Well, to me, I call music the divine art. And the reason I say that is, if you think about any memory that you've had in your life, if I said to you, what were you guys doing 20 years ago on this date? And you could probably maybe think of a few things and pull some things together. But if I played you a song from that date, every memory comes back. The smell in the kitchen, if it's somebody cooking, smell of your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever it is. You remember all of those things, all those senses. And music is the thing that unlocks that. Now, anything that has the ability to do that, why would we take that away from kids, from nurturing kids? You're nurturing kids, those are their roots, right? And so to take that out is the most crazy thing ever. The other thing that music does that's so important is, first of all, it brought all of us together today, right? It brought all of us together today. And whenever you think about important moments in your life, whether it's a graduation, a wedding, a funeral, or if it's to raise money for whether it's Hurricane Katrina or whatever those things are, the first thing you do is you get together and you play music because it reunites everybody. The other thing is you look at festivals, you look at Coachella and you look at all the big festivals. You could be partying next to somebody because you're feeling a beat or you're feeling a vibe. You may never, ever come in contact with that person again. But for that moment, music is the thing that unites us all. And I think that there's maybe in some way, and I may be reaching here, but there's a correlation between the kind of, I don't know, separatist nature of kind of society in many ways, that I think if music can be injected into that, or maybe the lack of music in the schools at some point maybe contributes to that.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm so in favor of doing it, and I'm glad you're involved with the schools. I know Wyclef is too, but it's important. And I tell people all the time, I ran into a bass player, just random story. I ran into a bass player who came up to me, this was when I was actually chairman of the Grammys, and he said to me, hey, I want to get involved, and I want to get involved with what you guys are doing. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I play bass. And I said, oh, great. I said, what school did you go to? And he said, mention the school. And I said, you ever taken your bass and just gone to the school and go in and sit in with the thing, with the class and whatever? And he said, oh, I never thought of that. And I said, yeah. I said, so don't wait for us to do something for you. Go do it. But then let us know that you did it. And now we can take that and spread the word about it. And that's the thing. So, I mean, I just think it's important because, like I say, it's the uniter. Music is the great uniter. Doesn't matter color, ethnicity, doesn't matter, young, old, doesn't matter. A good song, we all feel it, and then we share that together. And there's something that's so magic about that.
I'm thinking of a really good song right now.
Uh-oh.
Called I Shoulda Wore Pants.
He'll produce it.
That is a good one. We're going to work that one up, bro. We'll work that one up.
How you going to touch that?
I'm struggling here to keep this together. Sorry.
I love it. So good.
Top that, Wyclef.
All right, I should have wore a skirt. So in Hollywood, right, there was a time when filmmakers understood how important the value of film was and understood how important an institution for film in Washington would be and how important it'd be. So they all lobbied for it to make sure that the right legislations got passed, right? Because if you take all of the black and white okey doke out, right, there's two things. You have, when you are going to vote for someone, you have to see what their policies are, right? So at the end of the day, if we need things to advance within the music programs, there's two things. So as a private sector guy, I would put money out and invest and buy instruments for kids and do different things. But when I see that there's a legislation and there's a policy which is actually protecting and funds are actually coming in. I mean, you know how much money we use for the military? Just give me one fraction of that and say, you know what? Throughout the United States of America, we are going to enforce the music programs for the kids. So as we move towards the future, it's so important that we understand that same energy that back in the days they had in Hollywood, and understanding not that we don't have music institutions in Washington, but at the end of the day, when it's time to raise money for these schools and it's time to cut budgets, the first place that they're cutting these budgets in is the music programs. So I think that we need to lobby more, coalition more, and gain more presence in Washington.
It's really criminal that they do this because music in schools has been linked to kids learning and having better learning experiences. Yeah. So what you're saying is absolutely right.
Well, the basic, and the basic idea about that is if you think about the way that you learned language, you learned the alphabet is the first thing you learned. But you didn't learn it A, B, C, D. You couldn't ever remember that. Yeah. As soon as you put a melody to it, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. What's the next line?
H-I-J-K-L-M-N-O-P.
Just testing you, making sure. But if something as simple as putting a melody on words makes you retain it, then why would we take that away?
Yeah.
If anything, that needs to be.
Is this a race thing? Is this, I mean, when you consider most of this occurs in inner cities, many of the inner cities have an overwhelming majority of people of color, Latinos, et cetera. Can it be construed as a race issue?
It's a rich and poor thing, along with you know, because I'm sure private schools don't have issues with school, you know,
Right.
with music programs and things like that. So I think it's more than just race. Obviously, yes, but it's also, for, you know, in my opinion, the haves and have-nots type thing.
Yeah.
So
Failed policies.
yes, yes.
If I were to ask you, what artist today, other than yourselves, what artist today is making the most profound, most important music that deals head-on with race in any genre of music? Off the top of your head, who would it be and why? What would you think?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one because I'd have to think. The person that pops into my mind is J. Cole. J. Cole is, to me, we had a chance to work with him a few years back. And to me, on all issues, not just racial issues, but just issues across the board, I just think he's one of the great storytellers that we have right now.
Yeah. Wyclef?
Well, on YouTube, the #1 form of music is Afrobeat.
Oh.
Can you imagine these kids are coming from Nigeria with nothing? The #1 form of music. So for me, the idea of generation after generation, what has happened to Africa, and now you get these kids packing stadiums in America with this movement called Afrobeat, and everyone's like, where does this thing came from? It makes me so happy, and it shows you, like, when they say you can't keep good people down. So at the end of the day, I'm inspired to see kids coming from third world countries, and that you're going on Spotify, and these kids are talking about, yeah, you know, we African, baby, but we not rocking dashikis, man. It's a new era. This is what we're doing. And then they starting to, so, I mean, my daughter is 14 years old. She living in the burbs. I'm like, what are you listening to? She said, Daddy, this is Burna Boy. And you know, and they got, hey, this is, I do my, and she's singing it as if it's the most natural form of music. So I'm very excited about the Afrobeat movement.
I'm always interested in people that are making statements in their music. Just here recently, Gary Clark Jr. did just that.
Here from Austin.
Yeah, here from Austin. I was really proud of that. And so I would say Gary Clark for sure.
There's been a couple, not many, you're one of them, who entered into the political arena to try and do things based on your music, but take it into a different arena, into the political arena, when you were pretty much involved with the things that were happening in Haiti, your native country. Is this a good idea? Was that a good idea for you to do that? Would you do it again? Should others do that as well?
Well, we started this by me telling you that I'm a student of Harry Belafonte. And I think through the course of this conversation, people actually is like, this guy not just a rapper, he actually has a different kind of brain, right? For me, why not? 80% of a population is living on less than $1 a day. At the end of the day, coming from this place and what I learned in the West, it was so important. This is not anything where I woke up and I embarked in this. 5 years prior to this, I was in Congress negotiating for a textile bill, which is called HOPE, which has brought more jobs into the country. I was the one that negotiated with the gangs in the UN. This is 5 years before any of this. So at the end of the day, I took a shot of it because at the end of the day, when I study Martin Luther King, if we just sit back and we don't do nothing, meaning, did I become president of Haiti? No, I didn't become president of Haiti. But I promise you, there's a 12-year-old that's gonna become president of Haiti because of me pushing the needle forward. And at the end of the day, it is all up to every one of us to basically, is it popular? No. But at the end of the day, we do it because we forget what we are humans are really responsible for. It's the idea of inspiring. and putting ourselves in a situation where we sacrifice ourselves for the next generation. Yeah. So that's why I did it.
Wow. You know, back in the day, I was reminded the other day when I was telling someone we were going to do this panel, and he said, wow, make sure you talk about what had happened in the late 40s and 50s and how music, in particular rock and roll, helped segregate this country. And he reminded me of things that many of you perhaps know, some of you certainly intimately perhaps, and certainly the Motown artists that are in the audience remember this as well, where particularly down south, when a black artist would perform in the 1950s, a rope would be set, and white people on one side, white teens on one side, African-American teens on the other side. And during the course of the music, that rope would come down, and the kids would force that rope to come down, and all of a sudden, blacks were dancing with whites, kids coming down from the balcony and dancing there. And it gave people hope and courage, and it used popular music as a way to bring the races together and to destroy the evils of Jim Crow. As we move forward today and we get into the 21st century, it's clear, obviously, hence the reason why we're here, is that we're faced with new issues regarding race in this country. What role does music need to play as we move forward in this challenge? Shemekia, I'll go all three with you. Go ahead.
Well, I think it starts with just the commentary. Like I said, I think that for me, what I try to do is stay current with the issues. You know, if somebody goes to jail for date rape, that's what I'm singing about. If somebody, you know, if there's been a big domestic violence case, that's what I'm singing about. And here recently, it's been all about racism, hate, and things of that nature. So I just kind of put it all out there in hopes that it would help to bring people together in some sort of way. And that's how I try to help. And just educating people. Right. Yeah, because
so you're almost using your music as an editorial in some parts.
Absolutely, because I know that I know you can change people just by educating people. Yeah. So and that's what I try to do.
And Jimmy, you know, your career goes all the way back to Minneapolis with Days with the Time and Prince and others. So you've really crossed a lot of genres and trends in popular music. As we go forward here, what's the responsibility? What's yours personally, and what's the artist's responsibility to confront these issues that we're faced with?
Well, I think the responsibility is always you will always want to leave the place better than you found it. Yeah. And I think music is such a powerful tool to do that. So the idea that we have is just to create music that not only the soundtrack in a passive way, but also in a very empowering way to educate people. It's interesting, we did a record a while back. One of our artists, Janet Jackson, just got inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But one of the cool things was I was always inspired by, my favorite album of all time is Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. That's my favorite album of all time. So we, later on in life, when we had the opportunity, we did an album called Rhythm Nation with Janet. And it was an album that was interesting because a lot of people didn't know that we were talking about racism, we were talking about drugs, gangs, we were talking about all kinds of things. But it had this beat to it, and everybody's just dancing, and oh yeah, you know. But they were getting the education, and now when they look back on it, they go, man, I learned about those things from listening to that album. So I think what music has the power to do is to educate and inform people, but not in a way where you're sitting down and going, oh man, you know, you're doing it. And that's that. So the responsibility is to continue to create music. Sometimes it's not about, my partner Terry always says, it's not necessarily what people want, right? But it's what they need, you know? It's like if you ask a kid, you know, hey, what do you want? Oh, I want a candy bar and I want, you know, whatever. But then you go, well, you got to have some spinach, right? Well, they may not want the spinach, but they'll be glad that they got it later on when they understand. Yeah. And almost, so we don't want to make musical spinach necessarily, but we want it to be things that you can ingest and take in and take to your heart and take to your soul, and then go out and then empower. That empowers you, which then empowers you to go empower other people. Yeah.
I think music's supposed to make you feel something, you feel me? gotta be sexy, man. You feel me? So, I mean, I'm in the studio with Shakira, you feel me? And I was getting, so, you know, and I'm here, you know, and I'm trying to get it. And, you know, she comes, she goes, you know, it's not a hit if my hips don't move, right? So then I start getting into Shakira. But now when you go back, you listen to this song and you'll be like, I said, you know, it's the Colombians and Haitians, you know? And basically I was saying, we're not selling cocaine today. We basically came to bring y'all music. So I always think it's important that you, and it's a hard thing to do. I always say it's easier for me to write music for people than for myself, because for me, I'm always like thinking about how I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. But I always think like the best music is the music that makes you feel an emotion, whether you're gonna think, whether you're gonna dance. But I feel the writer that always writes pure, it takes us to a space.
Yeah. I want to thank my panel. Everyone, Wyclef Jean, Jimmy Jam, Shemekia Copeland. Thank you all. Thank you.